Hey there, my name's Kirk Pilon.
And I'm Shay Myers.
For a research proposal, we've decided to investigate inclusive education and how it's burning out teachers.
While gathering information to craft our final proposal, we found a few things that we felt were significant.
Yes. Now, the first significant learning that we found was despite what is commonly understood about inclusive education, there is no clear definition of what constitutes inclusive education. It is also argued that more empirical evidence is required in order for the inclusive model before it's considered an evidence-based practice. Now that's according to Limbach-Reek in Gray and Wilcox 2017 on page 205. Now, although inclusion has data that supports it, Limbach believes that there's arguably not enough data.
Now, to bridge our latest article, Davis 2018, and to note one of the issues with research is that research of the highest quality may never make its way into public school classrooms simply because the pipeline through which important academic discoveries travel to schools and classrooms is inconsistent, inchoate, and often tainted by the political process used to craft education policy. Page 570. This is an important message to understand here. Money is a huge benefactor in education, and the data that we have gathered suggests that perhaps politics have an influence on the education sector and the inclusion model. Many teachers have suggested that inclusion is an attempt to save money. However, it does not receive always the necessary funding for its intent.
Now in 2000, Dr. Alan Edmonds, a professor who specializes in educational psychology, he critically analyzed the Newfoundland and Labrador special education system. Edmonds reported that teachers were upset at a lack of resources and a larger workload. They believed that inclusion was a cost-saving measure by the province rather than a well-intentioned initiative. And that was cited in Cook 2017. Although many teachers supported inclusionary practices, we are curious if the education system is doing the model justice, or is it just like Edmonds' observations, where the inclusion model is just a cost-saving measure for the government and school divisions. In addition to this, many teachers feel that the realities of inclusion are creating larger amounts of work for educators without adequately meeting the needs of diverse students.
Finally, many teachers struggle with inclusion because they feel ill-equipped to meet the individual needs of each student in this setting while still covering the mandated curricular outcomes. Classroom management practices can also be inadequate when dealing with a diverse population of students, some with behaviors that can be disruptive or destructive. According to the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation 2015 final report of the Joint Committee titled Understanding and Exploration of Teacher Time and Workload Intensification, teachers and students are spending significant amounts of time in activities other than direct instruction and learning. Time for these activities comes out of the 1,500 weekly minutes available to principals for allocation. This leaves less than 1,500 minutes available for subject instruction, and this can be found on page 4. This lack of time for instruction, combined with limited built-in planning and preparation time, means that for many teachers, finding appropriate individualized adaptations, behavioral or classroom management strategies, and planning lessons can be stressful and difficult. The lack of appropriately trained personnel, such as teachers, support teachers, educational associates, outside support personnel, including occupational therapists, speech-language therapists, and educational psychologists, to support inclusive classrooms can also be a source of stress for educators, as with the decreasing educational budget, loss of $54 million in the 2017-2018 school year, educational positions have not been filled while classrooms continue to support the same number of students or even more students than previous years. That was found in a CBC article in April 10th, 2018.
Now, with the best intentions in mind, inclusion is becoming a hot topic in education. Education for all, meeting the needs of students equitably, higher standards of education, and feeling of belonging for all students are all qualities that are desirable for all learners. However, catering to these needs are occurring at the expense of teachers. This requires an examination of the inclusion model and how we can restructure and take action. We must compose suggestions and recommendations that will place qualitative research data in the correct hands for change.
The objective of our research is to make connections between inclusive education, the workload intensification, and premature teacher burnout. We would distribute a questionnaire to participants through an electronic survey such as SurveyMonkey. The results from the survey will allow us to identify patterns in the data to draw conclusions.
For our proposal, we plan on gathering qualitative data. The goal of the questions will be to help researchers explore participants' experiences with inclusion and understandings around teacher workload and stress. The questions will be open-ended, which will allow participants to respond in their own words, which will create a more authentic interaction between the participant and the question. The questions will be written using common educational language, which will make it easier for participants to respond to the questions without asking for clarification from the researcher.
A digital survey would be distributed to the participants electronically through the Prince Albertan Area Teachers Association, so the PAATA emailing list. The digital survey would be distributed throughout Prince Albertan Area, and which would allow for a large sample space. From the results of the survey, the research would be able to make generalizations based on the results.
And through the mailing list, the researcher would be able to reach a large possible sample of potential participants. A homogeneous sample is required for this study, as it would reduce the number of unrelated variables that will affect the study. Homogeneous groups can be created by dividing participants by their locations and years of experience in teaching assignments. The geographic location would include Prince Albertan Area and would include both rural and urban teachers within the association. The subjects that choose to participate would complete a digital survey.
The methodologies for gathering data would include a digital survey with specific open-ended questions that address a teacher's stress with regards to their workload in an inclusive setting. This can reduce social biases and increase a person's ability to respond authentically. The projected participant sample size would include about 100 teachers, half of which would be rural and the other half would be urban. When quantifying the research data, the research would consider the number of years that the participant has been teaching, the age of the participant, whether they teach in an urban or rural school, whether or not they have taken a stress leave from their position, and if they have, and for how long, and if they have any special training to help them effectively implement inclusion. It is also important to note if any of the types of supports that a teacher has received. These supports may include, and are not limited to, technological learning aids, support staff within the classroom, co-teaching, or resource programming. Thank you.
Thank you.